Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Elsie Burrows with the Travel and Tourism Research Association. TTRA unites the best and brightest in the travel and tourism industry, and we are happy you are with us today. We're looking forward to our final annual chapter conference of the year, the Asia Pacific Chapter Conference from November 30th to December 3rd in Bangkok, Thailand. Registration is also open for the 2025 Marketing Outlook Forum taking place in Fort Worth, Texas on January 27th through 29th. If you register now, we have special early bird savings. If you would like to learn more about MOF and the annual chapter conferences or look into upcoming webinars, please visit TTRA.com. Welcome to the TTRA Partner Webinar Using a Next Generation DSP for Destination Marketing with Jayson Ayers, SVP of Revenue at North America Azira, and Jay Wilson, VP of Marketing Solutions at Azira. Now I'll hand things over to Jayson and Jay. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Elsie. Appreciate it. Well, thank you everyone for taking time out of your afternoon to learn a little bit about how technologies that are evolving, obviously the landscape of technology and marketing and research and analytics tools and whatnot is constantly evolving. So appreciate you guys specifically taking the time to dive into some of the latest tools that are available and out there. A little bit of background on Azira before we dive in. So Azira, as a company, we did a rebrand. Formerly, we were Uber Media and also Near Intelligence, but we rebranded at the beginning of 2024 as Azira. But as an organization, we've been around and working in the tourism sector for about 14 years. I've been with the company for 13 years. Jay's been around for almost 10. So we're very familiar with the landscape of destination marketing, destination research, and hope that you guys find this useful. At its core, Azira is a data and research company. We collect primarily location data from a large swath of brand safe smartphone apps, both on Android and iOS. You've all seen the pop-up on your screen where an app is asking or requesting permission to share your location. That location data is then shared with third parties like Azira, where we make that data anonymous, but also useful for destination marketing, research, as well as a whole host of other sort of insights that can be derived from that data. One thing that is a little bit unique about Azira is not only are we a data insights company at our core, we also own and operate an entire marketing intelligence stack. So the ability to not only do data research and data insights off of this data, we can also merge that data in with other types of data, demographic data, interest data, and we'll get into those details later. But we make that actionable. So you can actually create audience segments, you can execute a marketing campaign, and you can also do attribution or location foot traffic measurement, if you will. So that's just sort of the context of who we are. But what we want to talk about today is sort of how marketing solutions and marketing tools are evolving in the landscape of not only for research purposes, but how they can be used to help influence and drive visitors to specific destinations, and then also really understand the story of what's happening with dollars that organizations are spending, right? So the goal of today is to talk a little bit about how marketers and analysts can best understand visitors to their destination, right? And selecting or partnering with the right DSP, and I'll get into what DSP means, can make that easier, faster, and more efficient, right? So DSP stands for demand side platform. And in the marketing world, that's a fancy way of saying that's the marketplace where publishers or app providers, websites, connected TV vendors, all types of digital content providers can get connected with advertisers, right? Marketers who want to, place ads within those different ecosystems. Jay, anything you want to add before we move forward?
Yeah, just to level set it at its very core, a demand side platform allows marketers to raise their hand in an auction and say, this is how much if I'm interested in buying a set of eyeballs, which are essentially for sale for a brief moment of time, and how much I'm willing to pay for it. That's the basic functionality. And Jason's about to address the the evolution of these over time. Um, it's important to consider all of the other aspects that now shroud these DSPs and what make them so interesting and so powerful for both analysts as well as marketers themselves. And that's what we hope to address today. But yeah, we like to think of a DSP as the most critical function in the auction. So there's a lot of different auctions out there. There's a lot of really noisy ones. There's some small, quiet ones that look a lot like fine art auctions, and there's some big flea markets, if you will, or some really big cattle sales also. There's all types of auctions, this plays a role in all of them.
Yeah, so this concept of connecting content creators, if you will, with advertisers goes all the way back to the earliest days of the internet, right? The early 90s. And the very first platforms that emerged were simply that. They were a marketplace where publishers of digital content on the internet could connect with advertisers who wanted to, buy that advertising space, right? Fast forward, and that was really the case. They were fairly rudimentary for probably the first 10 to 12 years of the internet. It really was the birth of mobile and the birth of the smartphone, where now instead of just having websites, we had an explosion of advertising opportunities. We had YouTube come on the scene. We had mobile apps come on the scene. And then the second generation of DSPs had to account for this. There were places where now I wasn't just trying to place an ad on the Yahoo homepage, right? I was after a specific type of person or a specific profile, right? So now I'm after business travelers, I'm after luxury travelers, or I'm after family travelers, right? And I want to be able to reach them across all these different platforms, but I'm really at my core, my goal is to target those specific type of users. And that was really the case of how things were until maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when really this next generation of DSPs came on the market, and they were really built around large data sets. So now we know a whole lot about people who are using or consuming content across all these different types of platforms. And the smartphone is at least the place where we chose to start, because the smartphone and smartphone apps in particular, they're what people use for hours and hours on end, and they take them with them everywhere. And they're very willing to, in an anonymous fashion, right? We're not tracking individual people around, but they're willing to share that information up the stream in order to make the app more functional, in order to get more content that's specific to them, etc. And what that also allows us to do, right? Next gen DSPs that are built this way, if it's tied to primarily smartphone location data on the front end to build the audience, but it also is tied in on the back end, because even if we built an audience because we observed someone frequently visits museums in the Northeast, right? So we know that's the type of traveler they are. Um, then we show them ads across connected TV on, say, Hulu, for example. We can still bridge that back to, did they carry their smartphone device back to a museum in Baltimore, right? So when you have a DSP that's merging that data sets from both ends, you get a lot of additional functionality. And we'll get into some more details about that in a minute. But again, the thing that's important to power sort of this this new model, right, of let's not just serve ads to people because of the website they're on or because of the app they're using. We want to target them because of all kinds of other data attributes. Well, you have to have access to all of those data attributes. Um, And as I mentioned earlier on, Azira as a company, we've been around for 14 years. In a lot of circumstances, we will sell that data, the raw data, and it is in very high use throughout the tourism industry. I can just say that. But on the flip side, we also are able to offer this full stack of marketing solutions connected to that same data set. Jay, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's important to distinguish also, just in context of the next generation DSPs as it pertains to this, there's two definitive flavors of it. There's the flavor that has a built-in data set that has a continuous set of operations here. And then there's others that are more like marketplaces, right? That take a bunch of third-party providers, vendors, and measurement partners and bring them together in that way. So there's two flavors here to choose from, and we'll be discussing both.
Yeah, that's a good point. So traditional DSPs, the old school DSPs, the Trade Desk, the DV360s, the Xanders of the world, they really are a marketplace first and foremost to service the publishers and the advertisers. And all of the data, the audience data, the measurement capabilities, the attribution pieces, the conversion pieces, those are all third parties that are bolted into that ecosystem, right? Um, and there's a benefit to that. One, choice, right? There's a lot of different choices within those two places, right? You can choose from a whole myriad of audience data within the LiveRamp ecosystem connected to the trade desk. Um, and you can choose from a whole lot of different measurement or foot traffic vendors on the other end. But what's different is all of the data that was used to build that audience inside the LiveRamp ecosystem lives outside of the trade desk. It's not directly connected to it. All of the data used in the Foursquare or placed measurement panel lives outside of the trade desk. Versus what we're observing is next generation DSPs are coupling all of that data together so that the same data set you're using to build the audience is built from the same audience set, the same data set that we're going to execute the campaign, which also is the same panel of users we're going to take advantage of when we're doing the measurement piece, right? So it all starts with understanding, understanding the visitors that you're looking to attract, right? Being able then to build that audience set, activate the campaign across all different types of media, right? Whether that's mobile in-app, whether it's desktop web, whether it's connected TV, or streaming services, and then measuring how many of those people who observed my ads in different audience segments actually came back and visited my location.
And at risk of getting into the weeds on it, there is a technical reason why it's preferred to have an inline measurement, an inline data set. So when you're using a marketplace approach and you're stuck with a bunch of pixel as your source of truth, which is great and it's very easy to broadcast, it only comes with a certain number of data points. But if you're on the auction side, where a DSP receives what's called an open RTB request, it has a huge number of variables in it, and that helps inform the data sets about who these customers are that you're reaching and how to map them back to these data sets. So there's actually a very concrete attribution system that is helpful when it's housed in a single ecosystem versus kind of a bolt-on. That being said, they both are effective.
Well, what happens is if you build an audience segment, for example, off of Visa purchase data that you buy through LiveRamp, and then you try to show ads to all of those people, the reality of the situation is there's going to be a large amount of drop off because not all of the people who Visa has collected data from are actively on the platforms where you're trying to show them ads, right? For example, they may not use Facebook, right? They may not use Hulu. They may not be people who frequently use the ESPN app, right? So if you build your audience off of a completely separate data set from one that you observe on a regular basis, probably what we've seen is roughly a 75 to 85% drop off, right? So you can build the ideal custom audience, but if you're not building it off of a data set that is predictably addressable, then you're paying for a big audience and you're only going to really hit 20 to 25% of it, right? So you really want to try to tighten up that, right? Because you're paying for a lot of data that you're not able to use, right? The same thing happens on the back end with the measurement piece. If you execute an ad campaign across a certain curated publisher set, but then you use, a measurement vendor that their user panel is based off of a very different profile of users, right? For example, a lot of measurement vendors will use weather apps. That's great. But not everybody uses a weather app every day, right? So if you're only using weather apps to measure the effectiveness of the foot traffic effectiveness of your ad campaign, then your results of that measurement are going to be skewed, right? Anything you want to add, Jay?
No, I think that's a great call out. What does that mean, Jayson, that if that 85% loss, what
Yep.
does that mean from a dollars and cents perspective in your mind?
Well, I guess it depends on how you're paying for the audience, but really what it comes down to is not so much a cost loss, it's a lack of predictability, right? So if your goal is to reach X number of people and you build the audience such that it will accomplish that, but then you're only able to show ads to 25% of them, you're missing the other 75%, right? So there's a real drop off there. And what tends to happen, right? A lot of marketers don't talk about it a ton, but what tends to happen is we just we show our full budget of ads just to the 25% that we can see,
Yeah.
right? And so you're missing out on on a much bigger swath of the audience, right? Um, so the another key characteristic of next gen DSPs is the ability to get very precise in terms of how we're building the audiences, right? Now this is just an example. This is a screenshot from our interface, our DSP called Advance by Azira. So within our interface, you can actually log in and you can custom draw polygons or geoframes around individual points of interest. You could also do it around an entire city. But the benefit, if you could measure or pull an audience from an entire city, but we found that it's more powerful if you customize that audience down to the type of traveler that you're either trying to attract or hoping to, get your message across to. Um, you can draw those custom polygons. In this case, it was, a sports stadium with all of the accompanying parking lots that go with that. And then you can see where it says get count or devices. You set your time frame, you select your locations, and then you can quickly see how many unique users, how many devices have we observed in these geo frames over this specific time period. You don't have to custom draw polygons. Most platforms like ours will have also a library of polygons that are already created, so that you could just select all of the museums or all of the zoos or all of the golf courses for specific cities, and pull those devices out.
Just
Um,
a helpful hint, if you're in the business of drawing polygons, or if you're out shopping for a vendor for that, uh, you should often ask, are parking lots included? Because most people tactically are using their phones when they're in the parking lot, and less so when they're in the venue or the store. Although we do see plenty of data points in store, it's often in the parking lot where most of the activity happens, because
sure.
just naturally you're sitting in your car waiting, or checking your email, or playing Words with Friends ahead of heading into the store, heading back out into traffic. So
Or in
if
this case,
you're in the
tailgating.
business of it, yeah,
Maybe you're tailgating.
that's right. Yeah.
So I mentioned at the top, at Azira, we typically begin with smartphone location data as our primary data source to start with determining what type of audience we want to target with ads. But we can also merge that data with more classic advertising type data, right? Demographics, age, gender, household size, education, etc. Other interests that folks tend to have, right? Purchase intent, right? Financial information, charitable giving, ethnicity, these types of things. So we're not solely relying on uh, location retargeting. We can also layer in other types of data, and any solid next generation DSP should have this, and you should dive into where are they getting this data, right? Um, and how is it being incorporated?
Let's take a moment to talk about device graph too, because we've
Okay.
talked a lot about mobile. We've talked a lot about these interest-based data, but there's also CTV, there's desktop, there's mobile web. And, as Evan, who's on this call, knows, it's not often someone's taking their CTV to Disney World, right?
Right.
That's an important part of this. Creating a device graph for whatever vendor, uh, we we create device graphs based on IP address and home location and common daytime location, and that helps provide a dossier of devices that we can target different types of ads to at different times and still measure where in the world the people exposed to the ad actually went. And it's easy to forget that that's available to everyone, and it's important that a DSP can accommodate that cross platform, both attribution as well as being able to actually get CTV inventory out there for you and in front of your audience.
That's right. And everybody creates those device graphs a little differently, right? So it's a good point that you want to dive in and understand how is that device graph being created, maintained, and kept active, right? Because while there are certain attributes to travelers that are consistent, right? People tend to change their ethnicity, for example, but their travel patterns do change, right? And they can be different seasonally, right? During certain seasons, I might be a certain type of traveler, right? During other seasons, I'm a different type of traveler, right? I do most of my business travel during this period. I do my leisure travel during other periods. And when you want to influence uh, the decision making around where I'm going to travel, might be different throughout the year. And without access to solid data to determine that, you're guessing, right? So a lot of our guesses are correct. A lot of our assumptions are correct. A lot of them aren't, right? But regardless, as analysts and researchers, we always want to have access to the best data possible, right? And pulling that from one unified source that you're going to use to do your research, then turn that into something that you can activate, and then having that same data set be what you're going to use to measure what happened, right? We spent or invested X amount of dollars to attract uh, people who tend to visit North Carolina beaches. We're going to try to attract them to South Carolina beaches. When should I be serving those ads? Who should I be serving them to? How effective were they at helping me do that, right? Or would I be better served trying to attract Georgia beach goers to South Carolina, right? Um, Having this level of having access to this level of data in the planning stage, as well as the execution phase and the measurement phase, is super important. Jay, anything you want to add before we move on?
No, I think it sounds trivial, but tying together all four, as I think about the four core functionality pieces that is offered here that you're looking for in a DSP, which is looking at where the people, like user movement and behavior, creating audiences, buying those audiences, and finally measuring, pulling all that together and then iterating for either your next campaign, for the existing campaign, or even some of your research efforts, and looking some of those demographic signals maybe that uh, have been missed in previous looks at the audience. all this can be very interesting from not only a marketing perspective, but I would imagine also from a research perspective.
Sure, yeah, and we haven't touched on it, but a really robust measurement solution ought to also be able to look back in time. So let's say you ran a marketing effort last summer, but you didn't necessarily partner with a vendor that could measure it. Well, if you've got an impression log of all of those ad impressions, we could upload that and we could actually tell you how many of those people you showed ads to last summer came and visited your destination, right? So that's another sort of uh, a valuable tactic to determine, hey, should we make that investment again? Right? So we've talked a lot about audiences. Creating audiences is as much an art as it is a science. We want to start with lots of data, but we also want to get creative with how we hone in on the type of users or type of travelers we want to attract to our destination. So here's an example of casino enthusiasts, right? Obviously, we could start with people who frequently visit casinos, but let's say take my wife, for example. She frequents casinos in Vegas. She's never gambled a day in her life, right? She doesn't fit the rest of the profile. She's staying there because of the hotel, right? But we might be able to hone in on some other attributes to attract the type of casino goers that we're actually after, or visitors. Or maybe not, right? People who stay at casinos but also like to frequent other types of places in the area. The purpose of this slide was just to illustrate that you can merge lots of different types of visitor attributes together to sort of hone in on the ideal visitors that you're looking to attract to your destination. Talk a little bit about audience extension. So a lot of times you want to try to reach as many potential travelers as possible. So that means not only trying to specifically place ads in front of a specific decision maker, but you want to influence the people who influence that decision maker, right? So you might want to also target ads to people who not exhibit exactly these attributes, for example, but not only these exact attributes, but everybody in the household, right? Or sort of the classic marketing look-alike extension, right? Where we look at folks who frequently visit locations similar to this person, exhibit lots of other types of patterns. Or in our case too, we have what's called a social extension. And this isn't so much social media per se, it's in the real world, who else do you hang out with that you don't live with? Who do you frequently spend time with that you don't necessarily live with? That's another powerful way to sort of create a broader audience segment in order to really extend the power of your ad dollars. Jay mentioned this earlier, but being able to build audiences, but then execute ad campaigns across multiple platforms is critical for any real next generation DSP. It's challenging if you get into a scenario where you run your desktop media over here, you run your mobile media over there, you run your connected TV media over here. Pulling that back together to tell the true story of what happened within a specific ad campaign gets very challenging. So you want to work with the platform that can cross media into these various platforms. The other thing that's important is premium supply. So having a real high quality supply source is important, right? So yes, we've honed in on the specific type of users that we're looking for, specific type of devices and places that we want to target them. But we also want to be showing our ads in very brand safe, very user-friendly, high-quality spots. So that's going to be very, very important for any next-gen DSP. Another thing we want to talk a little bit about was social media activation and measurement. So today, social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc., these are all walled gardens, right? You can only place ads within their ecosystems using their platforms. But what you can do is you can bring your own audience. So within next gen DSPs, what we're seeing, like in our own, you can build the audience, you can target that audience across mobile, desktop, connected TV, also push that audience directly to these social platforms to activate the audiences there. And we can also come full circle and measure, did the audience that you push to Instagram actually turn into visitors to your destination, right? This is very new capability, but it's one that's been very powerful for destination marketers. Jay, I'll let you jump in and talk a little bit about how people use reports like this to understand visitation.
Yeah, I'd say this is the bread and butter of the outcome of a campaign, right? Did you address one of your audience, and did you get the guess right? Were you influential enough to have them actually visit your location? And furthermore, when they were in the location, where else did they go? What kind of hotel did they stay in? What kind of point of interest were they at? And when during the week were they there? And a lot of this data can be tied together in a very specific way, all the way down to the creative that you supply to your DSP. We can measure all the way down to the creative level or at the entire campaign. You can tell where these folks came from. So their common evening location, was it folks that were visiting Austin, Texas, and they were from the Pacific Northwest? Were they from LA? Or were they from trying to escape the cold in Chicago? All of this helps inform not only the time of year that you're advertising, the type of messaging that you're delivering to these audiences, but also really honing in on their previous behavior. So, are they a repeat visitor? If so, how often do they repeat a visit? All this stuff is super critical in developing a picture of how effective an ad campaign is, and also better understanding your customer base, your visitors ultimately.
Yep.
Something that we can do retroactively. We're not just measuring to your location. We're not just measuring to Destin, Florida. We can also retroactively go back and say, hey, what hotels did these folks stay at? We can start to add really custom polygons. What type of beach were they at during their stay? Was it close to the hotel? Was it far away? What kind of restaurants did they go to? Anything that you can polygon and measure to, we can do that within the destination. And you don't even have to dream it up when you set up the campaign. You can do that after it's running and look at it in arrears and say, hey, I'm curious, did they go to that restaurant on the beach? We can tell you after the campaign's already wrapped up. Also, the important aspect of customization in this stuff with look back periods. So are we able to measure, or are you able to measure past 90 days of when someone saw an ad, 180 days? Because no one's typically seeing an ad and booking a vacation for the next day. You need to make sure that the look back period can be customized and continues even after the campaign is closed. Because
Right.
people will continue to visit and hopefully will visit after the end of the campaign. And you need to know, for your purposes and the success of the campaign, did they visit 180, 360 days later? That's important variable to be able to control.
Yep. Exactly. We don't need to dive into the specifics of this, but we want to include this slide in the presentation to talk about why is it that a next gen DSP doesn't have the same problems as a more traditional DSP at addressability, at performance, right? So at the risk of going too far into the weeds, essentially what happens is if you build your audience off of a data set that you already know is highly addressable, then you're obviously going to have a much better opportunity at serving ads to those individuals. The reason that that happens is, again, like I mentioned earlier, many times the audience data is completely separate from uh, the supply sources that are going to be used to execute a campaign, right? So, at risk of repeating myself, that is a very, very important piece of this. The other side of it is having a curated supply set that you're going to use that you know you're going to be able to address the audience is very, very important. When you're working with a much, much larger DSP, let's say you buy your own audience and take it elsewhere, the auction room inside those places is much noisier. right? There's a lot of private marketplace deals that have to clear. There's a lot of programmatic guarantees and all of these marketing terms that large publishers use and large advertisers use. A lot of those become a constituent in the auction. It's not a pure auction, but when you control your own auction room, these next generation DSPs that are more curated and built specifically to accomplish this are better able to do it. So having this high addressability means you can get better performance, more predictable performance, and also you also want to make sure that you can integrate the reporting into whatever other tools you're using, right? There's a lot of great dashboards in the tourism industry. And at least for our DSP, we've connected with most of them so that information from our DSP can be pushed directly to those sources so that you can then do your research, do your analytical studies in the tools that you already know. Your marketing efforts are being piped directly into it. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do as researchers, as analysts, and as marketers is understand the story of what's happening with visitors to our destinations, right? So where are they coming from? How long are they staying? What are they doing? How can we attract more of them? How can we increase the hotel stays, right, for our specific destinations if that's our mandate? That starts with understanding, first off, who your visitors are, where they're coming from, and secondly, trying to reach out to more people that would have a similar interest or would really enjoy coming to our destination, right? Jay, anything you want to add?
I think you've done a really comprehensive job here. Yeah, it's an extremely complicated ecosystem, and in an effort to simplify it, often things become more effective.
Yep.
Like if we just round it all out into something succinct.
So I want to be conscious of time and open it up to any questions that you guys have. Obviously, feel free to ask them now. We'll address them here in real time. But I wanted to put our contact information here on the screen. Feel free to reach out to us directly, or you can visit our website for any additional information.
That's fantastic. Thank you both so much. I'm going to wait just a second here and see if we have any questions in the Q&A.
Sure.
Looks like we haven't had any pop up yet. But we have contact information on the screen here. You also are always welcome to reach out to info@ttra.com. This webinar has been recorded and it will be sent to all registrants in the coming days. For those who are members of TTRA, you will have access to this recording for free. All non-members will be able to purchase this call for $30. I think we're going to give you guys some time back in your day, and I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
both so much.
Appreciate it.